Today, we're talking about what Coach Dan Quinn had to say on Victory Monday. Next, we're going to be talking about the final takeaways from the Commanders' win over the Giants. And lastly, we're going to be doing a little bit of a roster update around the Washington Commanders. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, just like Jaden Daniels is going to be hitting, Terry McLaurin, Debo Samuel, Zach Ertz, and many others for multiple touchdowns this upcoming season. And so in exchange for hitting that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Washington Commanders. And so make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Washington Commanders Insider family as we talk nothing but Washington Commanders football. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it. And let's start with what Coach Dan Quinn had to say on Victory Monday. And so we're going to be paraphrasing this. If you want to look at the entire press conference, you can head over to the Commanders YouTube page. And so just, again, paraphrasing this and just taking the key points out of this press conference. And so the first thing that Dan Quinn talks about is just really the defense and the attacking tone and how he's excited to see the defense grow. And he talked about how identity is everything. And so, look, I love this because when you go back and you look at yesterday's performance, I think that the defense really stole the day. I just loved how they dominated up front, taking away the run from the Giants. They made Russell Wilson very uncomfortable. And then the coverage on the back end was very sticky. And had it not been for a penalty, the team also got an interception, which ultimately got called back due to a penalty. But, man, the defense looked great. And I just think that so far in week one, a lot of the stuff that we had been reading about and, just seeing with training camp and everything with this defense, it definitely looked like it transferred over here on week one. But let's see what happens in week two, because this Green Bay Packers offense is going to be a different challenge. And so the next thing that Dan Quinn talks about in this press conference is he talks about Bill. And so he's talking about him being ready. And he just talked about the moment not being too big. And so, look, right there with them again, because with Bill, he's certainly a guy that he comes in and he just doesn't seem like a rookie that got drafted in the 7th round. In fact, just going back to what he said in the preseason, where he was talking about being patient as a runner, like that's something that usually you have to go out and you have to teach a younger player. And so the fact that Bill is thinking about these things, I think that it shows in his performance out there. And he had a great performance once they went ahead and cut him loose, because I was wondering if he was going to get some reps out there, because it looked like Austin Eckler was going to do the heavy lifting. But eventually they got Bill out there and he made some plays. And by the way, Bill is Ja'Cory Krosky-Barrett. So the next person that he talks about in the press conference is Micah Parsons. And so he's asked about him, and he said that he was surprised that he got traded and that he loved coaching him. But one of the things that he talks about that is going to be important for this upcoming game is just really preparing to play Micah Parsons. And so he talked about really you cannot simulate that speed. And so he's talking about Micah Parsons, the way that he can get off, the snaps and things like that. And so this is definitely going to pose a challenge here for this offensive line, which I think really handled the Giants very well. But again, a different challenge heading into week 2 on a short week. And so the next thing that he talks about is the penalties. And so he talked about wanting to clean that up. And he also talks about really how players kind of showed some resilience and come back from that. And so he talked about, whether it was Jalen Lane, dropping a football and then coming back and getting a conversion and stuff like that. He talked about Austin Eckler coming back after a penalty and stuff like that. And so those are things that he definitely wanted to see, but he surely wants to clean the penalties up. And so definitely not happy about that. And so the next thing that he talks about really is just, today's practice is going to be more like a Wednesday for the players. And so today would be the Wednesday, and then they kind of go from there on this short week. And so just kind of giving, just insights as to how the team is going to kind of slowly try to ramp back up and things like that. And so the next thing that he talks about is he talked about liking how the team finished the game as far as taking the air out of the clock, or really the air out of the ball. And then he also, too, talked about just not liking how the team finished the half. And so going back to that situation where there was the intentional grounding. And so we left 3 points on the board there. And so Dan Quinn does talk about about that. And then as far as players that he just brings up that really played well or just caught his eye. So he talks about Dietrich Wise, and he talked about him kind of getting out of a pile and kind of hustling over to make a play. So he talks about that. He talked about Tyler Biadasz coming out and just really holding up against the Giants and just really that defensive front there. So those were two players that he talked about. And then he talked about just the stingy back half of the defense and how he loved that. So he actually loved that term and everything else, but pleased with the line to scrimmage on both sides. And so that was Dan Quinn giving insights here on Victory Monday. And so next, I wanted to go ahead and jump into really the final takeaways from yesterday's win for the Commanders, because there were a couple notes that I didn't get a chance to talk about. And so starting with the first half, and just going back to just this defense and just really what they were able to do. One of the things that was talked about, or at least I had written down, is that, they held the Giants to 2.9 a carry in the first half, which was tremendous, for the Commanders. Again, I just thought that they did a terrific job as far as just creating a lot of negative plays and things like that. And I just think that you just saw the additions of Javon Kinlaw and Dietrich Wise and these guys like that. And just the personnel is just perfect, for this scheme that Joe Wood Jr. wants to run. And so just an excellent showing there. And so I think that that was one of the things that I wanted to talk about. And then, the next thing that I wanted to talk about as far as just the first half note was just, again, going back to Jaden Daniels and just the fact that he just doesn't look like a quarterback that's headed to a sophomore slump. I thought that you saw a quarterback that just showed a ton more confidence from year one. He already had, a ton in year one, but I think he showed even more and just a lot more poise, because there were the sacks that were given up. And you could see him out there smiling. It did not faze him. He was still out there running, making plays, looking to get the football down the field. And there were a couple plays that really the offense left on the table. I think that they definitely could have scored some more. In fact, there was one play that Dan Quinn does talk about, and I talked about it yesterday, where it was just a minor miss on Deebo Samuel. And I also think that that was a minor miss too on Terry McLaurin. I think that definitely would have brought the house down had they connected on that one. But, there was just some little stuff like that that needs to be cleaned up. But Jaden Daniels looking awfully good here. And so let's see what he's going to look like on a short week heading out to Lambeau Field. And so next, got to look here at Bill. And so Bill Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, I thought that, man, he just handled things like a veteran out there. I mean, he just doesn't seem like he's a rookie running back. Like Dan Quinn said, even though he had been sitting out there, when you looked at the game on the sideline, he was right behind Cliff Kingsbury, not sitting on the bench. He was completely engaged. And I mean, this guy is just ready to contribute, from day one. And look, the hype continues with Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, and I'm just looking forward to seeing how this team is going to utilize him. And they use Jeremy McNichols too as well. And so we still haven't seen Chris Rodriguez Jr., who I think is definitely going to play a factor this season as well. But make no mistake about it, man, this was all about Bill and just what he was able to do on his 10 carries, 82 yards. I love how he sealed the game, essentially, got pushed out of bounds there. So you would love to have him stay in bounds. But still, I loved everything that he did. Terrific on the reads and stuff like that. And another thing that he did, terrific block, because when you go back and you look at just that play in the fourth quarter where Deebo Samuel scores on that end around, it was a terrific kick out block from him, Laramie Tunsil, and then also too Tyler Biadasz, which is another player that Dan Quinn talked about. Man, you talk about just you create an alley here, you create an alley there, and then, or a seal there, and then you get an alley right there and you get a touchdown. And that's exactly what we saw. Two alleys that got just formed with the great blocking. And then you just saw Deebo Samuel make the play there. And so terrific blocks up front from him and just some others. And then next, some other key takeaways out of this too, as well, is just that going back to the defense, just another notable. So they had a 50% pressure rate on Russell Wilson. And so that's just a great pressure rate in week one. And so hopefully they can keep that going. And then, just lastly, man, just just with this team and everything else, and just going to that secondary again, I think that they're going to have just a lot of opportunities to get some picks and things like that, especially if you can generate that pressure. I loved what I saw from Marshawn Lattimore, even though he did get the penalty for the 15 yards for slamming the player or whatnot. But still, I love the way that he competed out there. He got a nice little bat down and things like that. And so at some point, they're going to get some footballs that they can just turn over at some point. So just looking forward to seeing this defense continue to grow. And so that was some of the final takeaways from yesterday's win. And then lastly, I wanted to go ahead and jump into a little bit of a roster update. And so it has something to do with the roster, doesn't really, but Kendrick Bourne went ahead and decided to sign with the 49ers. And so coming into week one, he had decided to sit out and he was going to make a decision. And so he decided to go ahead and sign with the 49ers. And so Kendrick Bourne not going to be with the Washington Commanders. And so I wanted to go ahead and give an update there, which is fine. I just think that now this is going to be the time where you're going to have to really depend on, some of the other guys to step up. And so I think we saw some of that with Jalen Lane. I think that he definitely has some room to grow out here. And so let's see if he can continue to make some plays. I thought that Noah Brown did a great job as well, but somebody else is going to have to step up if this team is going to get to their ultimate goal, which is winning the Super Bowl. And that's other than Deebo Samuel and Terry McLaurin. So that's the beauty of the NFL season. You're trying to get better as you go along. You want to get to your peak performance by the time you get to postseason and everything else. And so let's see if this team can continue to keep it rolling. We're going to start talking about just the matchup as they get ready to take on the Green Bay Packers on the road, Thursday night football, short week. And so it's going to definitely be exciting out there. And so, one more time, just giving it up for the defense. Joe Wood Jr., great job calling those defensive calls out there. Again, Dedrick Wise Jr. and that front line, man, they looked awfully good. And so anyway, you guys let me know in the comments, what were your final takeaways from yesterday's win? I'd love to hear what your thoughts were from Dan Quinn and his presser on Victory Monday. And lastly, what do you guys think about the news here that Kendrick Bourne is going to be heading back to the San Francisco 49ers? Do you think, that's fine because we have the players that are going to step up? And so let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking. And as we always say, look, go Commanders, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.